Cannabis is not solely responsible for the uptake and use of harder drugs. As a recovering cannabis user, I watch my own internal struggle of wanting cannabis because I'm addicted, and this just fuels my hatred towards harder drugs. I know how much I struggle with cannabis, and that in turn makes me dead set on never trying any hard drugs, even opioids for pain. I just won't do them. I have no interest in them because I know they can never benefit me. The risk is too great anyway. Cannabis is not a gateway for me. Cannabis is the gate. Many people believe cannabis is a gateway to harder drugs, and many studies have been done to back this up. But these studies don't take into account all the variables that go into someone's decision to use hard drugs. Arguments about how cannabis lowers your inhibition and impulse control and also rewire your brain are important to take into consideration when examining why cannabis isn't a gateway drug. We will see that many variables go into an individual's decision-making process, and at the wheel of that process is your mind. And what has created your mind is your concrete past, present, and projected future. So what is a gateway drug anyway? According to Cannabis as a Gateway Drug for Opioid Use Disorder by Arthur Robin Williams, quote, gateway hypothesis posits that a drug such as cannabis could lower the threshold for addiction to other substances such as opioids, end quote. Essentially, this hypothesis is saying that cannabis use makes it easier for those who use it to become addicted to harder drugs. Now this may be true for some people, but it is by no means a blanket truth for everyone. Take a look at this donut chart from Marijuana Statistics in the US, Cannabis Use and Abuse. You will see that cannabis abuse makes up the biggest section at 55 million people, while alcohol, opioids, barbiturates, stimulants, hallucinogens make up the other part of it. Now, if cannabis abuse is so high, and cannabis is a gateway to harder drugs like stimulants, barbiturates, and opioids, as seen on the chart, why do we only see 20.7 million of these combined three substances in abuse in 2020? Because not everyone who uses cannabis uses harder drugs. Therefore, it is unfair to make a blanket statement like cannabis is a gateway drug. There are so many variables that go into why people make decisions that they do, which means that when someone ends up using hard drugs, there isn't one specific reason that led them to make that decision. Their decision was guided by who they see themselves as, their past, their current environment, childhood experiences, and how much they're brainwashed by modern culture, to name a few. Many counter-arguments exist that try and hold up the false notion that cannabis is the only thing to blame for the use and abuse of harder drugs. One of these arguments involves impulse control. Now, it is true that cannabis lowers inhibition and impulse control. I have observed it myself and others I'm close to. When someone uses cannabis, they may get the munchies. They might go out and spend too much money on snacks, and they eat too many or all of those snacks. However, lowered inhibition and impulse control does not mean that cannabis can automatically be classified as a gateway drug. The environment plays a bigger role in the acquisition and use of harder drugs such as opioids, stimulants, and barbiturates, to name a few. Cannabis does also rewire your brain, but I challenge you to think of an action or thought that doesn't rewire and change your brain in some way. There isn't one. Everything you do and think is constantly rewiring and changing your brain, most times in minute, unnoticeable ways, but these small changes add up over time. Cannabis will flood your system with a lot of different neurochemicals in higher doses than almost any daily activity, such as eating, socializing, or exercising. But this still doesn't explain why people use hard drugs. So, what is the gateway? Your mind is the gateway. According to Marijuana Statistics in the US, Cannabis Use and Abuse 2023 data update, Gallup's 2021 report showed that 45% of all Americans have now tried marijuana. That's roughly 149 million people that have used cannabis at some point. And that's roughly 7 times the amount of people who abused opioids, barbiturates, and stimulants in 2020. Cannabis is not the gateway drug that some of us have come to believe it is. Otherwise, the abuse statistics of opioids, barbiturates, and stimulants would be much higher. If cannabis isn't the gateway, what is? The actual gateway to any hard drugs, any decisions, any thoughts, is your mind. Simply put, an individual will do what they believe in. So if they believe that harder drugs than cannabis will do something for them, or give them some sort of benefit, they will probably do them. How many times have you done something that you have no interest in because you know and believe that you will gain nothing from it and benefit from it in no way? Probably never. Now look at it the other way around. If you are interested in something because you think it will benefit you in some way, are you going to do it? You probably will. This illustrates my point that the mind is the true gateway to anything, including hard drugs. If you believe, you will probably do it. If you don't believe, you probably won't. Since not everyone who uses cannabis goes on to use harder drugs, I have hypothesized that the actual gateway is your mind, and the way someone's mind operates is dependent largely on their childhood and current environment. Today I've exposed how the blanket statement of cannabis is a gateway drug is not true for everyone, and therefore should not be taken at face value. There are many factors that contribute to an individual deciding to do hard drugs, so blame cannot be placed on cannabis alone. Cannabis is not a fantastic substance with no drawbacks, but it is not right to demonize it by placing all the blame on it for hard drug use. I have explained how the mind is the gateway to everything, and just because one substance finds its way into an individual's life, it doesn't mean that that person is doomed to use hard drugs at some point.